Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's your Kiwi Connection here, Kevmo7, and today we are putting up AMD's R9-290 reference model against AMD's R9-290x reference model. So this has been done quite a lot. It was done mainly when these cards first came out, and there was only the reference models. But I wanted to do it for myself just to see what differences I saw between the two cards. So let's get right into it. So the main difference between these two cards is that the 290X is a fully fledged Hawaii GPU in it, and that has more stream processors, everything, whereas the 290 is like a slightly cut down with a few things turned off as far as the GPU goes. So generally they figure it's about 10% less performance on the 290. We'll see soon if that's actually true. So the 290X is just, yeah, slightly better, but there's nothing really too fancy different. It's just a fully fledged Hawaii GPU against a slightly cut down Hawaii GPU, to put it basically. The memory, however, stays the same. So both of these have 5000 megahertz memory speed, and they're on the 512 memory bus and 4 gigabytes of video memory. So the memory is unchanged between these two cards. The GPU speeds are also slightly different, with the 947 megahertz of the R9-290 compared to the 1000 megahertz or 1 gigahertz of the 290X. So that's only the main difference between these two cards, that the 290 has a more, the 290 has a cut down Hawaii GPU slightly, by about, with a few things, and it's running at a slightly slower speed. So, yeah, they say about 10 to 15% performance increase in the 290X, but I don't know. The 290s are pretty powerful cards, so we'll just have to see. These do run the same cooler as well, the reference cooler. The styling might look a little bit different. That's because it's a Sapphire reference 290 against a Asus reference 290X. So that's the only difference there. And yeah, so that's about it. There's not really that much difference between these two cards. So we'll get straight into the benchmarks then. Oh, the one thing I forgot to tell you. I made the bad mistake. So 290Xs and all ship in silent mode. So that is with the switch on it facing away from the fan. Now I went through all my benchmarks and I was pretty sort of there was throttling quite a bit, and I was quite surprised at the results I got. And then I thought, oh, I bet I've left it in silent mode, and I did. So make sure, if you have a reference 290 and your switch is facing the wrong way, switch it back into Uber mode and you'll get maximum performance then. Silent mode, all it does is limit the fan speed to 40%, where in Uber mode it goes up to 55%. So in silent mode, obviously the GPU reaches a thermal limit quicker and throttles more. Now, into the benchmarks. So, first up is Firmark. This is 4 times MSA. This is for 15 minutes. And the average frames per second I saw on the reference 290 was 29. And the average frames I saw on the reference 290X was 35. So 6 frames there for the 290X, that would seem about right. But we'll get into Unigine Valley. This is in the Extreme HD preset. The reference 290 scored 53.3 frames per second average. The reference 290X scored 61.1 frames per second average. So big jump that time. Now into Heaven 4.0, DirectX 11, everything maxed out. The reference R9-290 scored 48.5 frames per second. The reference 290X scored 54 frames per second average, so that was a little bit closer, about 5.5 there, 6 frames. So yeah, the 290 still putting up a good fight. The Heaven, again, this is an OpenGL, everything maxed out. The reference 290, 35.2 frames per second average. the reference 290x, 38.5 frames per second average. So that one was a bit closer, but OpenGL usually brings them a bit closer together. Now do some games. So Tomb Raider, this is everything maxed out without VSync. The reference R9-290 scored 72.3 frames per second average. The reference R9-290x scored 81.9 frames per second average. So let's just call it 82, and that's almost 10 frames better for that 290x. And lastly, we have Bioshock Infinite. This is running everything maxed out. The reference 290 scored 108 average frames per second. The reference 290x scored 117 average frames per second. So what we can see from this is obviously the slightly 53 megahertz bump up in the clock speed. It does help, you know, it's a little bit of a difference, but it's more the GPU. It's much, you know, it's a fully fledged Huawei GPU, and that, you know, it's not cut down at all like the one in the 290. So it's just showing there that we're getting, you know, let's say an average 5, 6, 7 frames per second better on the reference 290x. So there's, you know, it's a decent difference. But let's get into the temperatures. So this is going to be the fun one. Yeah, so nothing too out of the ordinary in this one, but yeah, so in my Fermark test, this was, again, you know, 4 times MSA, this was for 15 minutes, and I take the highest temperature and the highest fan speed. Now, these are just running what Catalyst sets them at. So, in the test, the reference 290, the highest temperature I saw was 94 degrees Celsius, and actually got there relatively quickly and just held at 94 degrees for most of the benchmark. The reference 290x also got 94 degrees Celsius and also stayed like that for most of the test. However, the fan speeds were a little bit different. The 290 only went up to 50% fan speed, where the 290x rose to 57%, which is interesting because when I checked in Catalyst it was set to 55%, so max, so I'm not sure why it actually went up to 57. So there's a little bit of difference there. It's probably just how it's set up in Catalyst, because obviously the 290x is going to get a bit hotter, so they probably set it a little bit higher in fan speed. So yeah, that was the only real difference there. I also took the highest temperature I saw when I did the Heaven 4.0. This was the DirectX 11 benchmark. Once again, the reference 290 rose to 94 degrees Celsius, and the reference 290x rose to 94 degrees Celsius. So nothing too surprising here. These both run incredibly hot. This is by design, and it's fine that they run up to that temperature. So don't worry about, you know, the GPU screwing up. It's just how they're meant to run. But yeah, they do run incredibly hot. Now, with those high temperatures and somewhat high fan speeds, you'd expect a bit of noise, and these 290 and 290X is just, the reference models are just so loud. So they were both really loud. The 290X is slightly louder, as I said before. It rises to a slightly higher fan speed, but there's probably not that much in it. The main difference in noise that I have to say is that the 290X had a lot more coil whine. Like, you know, most graphics card, high-end graphics cards will have a bit of coil whine. You can hear it a bit before the fans ramp up and things like that if you start a game or a loaded application or something like that. The 290X was just really loud, the coil whine on it, so I'll let you have a listen. So this is what the coil whine sounded like on that 290X. So it's pretty loud, quite up there. But I'll let you decide for yourself what the fan noise is. So this is going to be pretty similar anyways. So this is what the reference R9-290 sounds like at idle. and this is what the reference R9-290x sounds like at idle. This is what the reference 290 sounds like on load during the Unigine Valley benchmark. And here is the reference 290x in the Unigine Valley benchmark. So they're both really loud, really hot cards, and yeah, the 290x has the coil wind, which I don't think would be all of them. I think it's probably just the one I got. You know, people get different cards. Some of them have really bad coil winds, some of them don't have barely any at all. So it's normally the individual card itself rather than what type of card it is, although some are a bit more notorious than others for doing it. But yeah, so I wouldn't read too much in that. It's probably just the one I got, although, you know, it could be that 290x's just have a slight bit more coil wind. Now, overall, what am I going to say about this? Well, this one's a little bit difficult to say because they're pretty much the same thing. It would really come down to value for money, because I can't say, well, one runs cool than the other, because they both run just as hot as each other. They're both just about as noisy. They both probably, if you go to 290x, probably wouldn't have as much coil wind as the one I got, so there probably wouldn't be too much difference overall in noise, everything like that. So it would more just be value for money, especially in the second-hand market. So if you're looking at buying one of these cards second-hand, then definitely look at that. But also when you're buying them new, just look around for specials and stuff like that. And if you can get the reference 290x for just a little bit more than the reference 290, then go for it. But if there's a big gap or the 290 is a lot cheaper, then you may as well just go for that. It will just be what the price is. But expect maybe 5, 6, 7 frames per second better on the 290x. But I'm not saying go out and spend a huge amount more money on the 290x. So that's going to round out this video. I will also be putting the reference 290x up against the Tri-X 290, so that'll be a bit closer, because a lot of people say, you know, well, why get a reference 290x when you can just get a non-reference really good 290 and they're just as powerful. So we'll see if that's true or not, and see how those two perform together. But I thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.